Hello everyone, my name is Zenitsu and I'm back with another Digimon video. Today I'm going to be doing a tier list, except it's not any average tier list. I'm actually going to be taking some data points and looking at results all the way from the start of the game to what's currently in development in Japan as of right now. So this is from sets 1 through 10 with 2 extra sets in between, and I've compiled and looked at all of that data to put this list together in my opinion. So as far as what the tier list is, if you couldn't tell, it's a color tier list. So I decided to rank the strength of each of the colors on a general basis. I know that a lot of the times it is a deck-to-deck specific thing, but sometimes the colors are just playing with certain mechanics and commonality in terms of the cards that they're using that transfer over, making them just a really strong performing color as a whole. So as far as what the best colors in the game are, I actually think it's a tie between blue and yellow. Blue and yellow have always been the best colors from the beginning of the game till, well, now, and they're still performing relatively strong just because the concepts that they're playing with are very, very powerful. Blue is a color that likes to bounce and stun the opponent's Digimon to really anti-tempo them and try to get ahead, on top of having really good memory manipulation and tamer quality to help passively gain some additional benefits while your deck is, well, doing multiple different things. Most of the time, blue likes to split apart its inheritable sources, strip the opponents of their inheritable sources, and multi-attack it to have some additional pressure. So it's just playing with a lot of different mechanics that's making it a very standout and very powerful color, in contrast to yellow, where it is a more defensive color, but the fact that it has the best removal in the game, on top of consistency coming from various other places, because it also has access to its security to play around with, and it manipulates that security in very powerful ways, not only just healing it, but buffing it, and trying to shove specific cards in there so that way you could trigger specific abilities. Most of the time, what you're trying to do with those specific abilities is shove options in to activate their abilities when they come out of security for free to do more powerful and controlling type stuff. On top of the fact that yellow just has very high tamer quality and good consistency in memory manipulation, similarly to blue. Maybe not as good as blue, but just good enough to make it above every other color. So those are, in my opinion, what I think the best two colors of the game are. Now, in terms of all of the other colors, I'm not saying just because they're not S tier, they can't compete. All of the colors still have a good chance and good representation on being competitively viable, depending on the deck that's going to be played. So purple is a color that has insane combo potential, making it A tier. So purple is another really highly consistent and powerful color just because it does work around a lot of mechanics. Purple is all about shoving stuff into the trash and utilizing your trash as a secondary resource, similar to how yellow makes security basically act as its secondary resource. So it's playing around with that aspect of the game. It has some really good removal and combo potential just because it either self-milling or drawing and discarding doesn't really matter. You're just trying to fill up your trash as quickly as you possibly can to make your cards as powerful and efficient as you possibly can. And the fact that purple just has a lot of built-in self-synergies, not only with just a deck-specific package, but various other packages that don't necessarily seem like they would fit in, just make purple a very complicated color to play and build a deck around. But that complexity has its own reward, and that reward makes it a very powerful color to be playing around with. Now, as far as B tier, we have red and black. Red and black are kind of similar, not really. Red is a very one-dimensional color where it just tries to do one thing very, very well, and that's just hit as hard as it possibly can. It has some really good removal in terms of just blanket deletion and deleting through DP, but you're not necessarily trying to play red hardcore for its control aspect. You're just trying to play red because it has the ability to punch for a lot of the opponent's security, and that's kind of what red has always done and does very well. Black, on the other hand, kind of is a mixed bag. It has like the toolbox potential to do lots of different things, but usually it is just kind of like red, where it just tries to hit as hard as it possibly can. It has some really good defenses in terms of actually having and utilizing blocker, probably the most efficient out of any of the other colors, and has a slew of different keywords and different decks that it generally likes to work with, but black seems to be more of an archetypical heavy color compared to a lot of the others, where it has a lot of self-baked in packages, and sometimes those packages are really good, and then sometimes those packages are, well, not really good. So it's kind of a mixed bag, bringing the color down as a whole just because it doesn't have as many generic tools as some of the others because of all of these archetypes that it plays with. And then lastly, we have C tier, which is going to be green. Green is seen as the worst color of the game. It's kind of like red. It does the one thing it's been doing very well. It is trying to branch out and do various other things, but most of the time you're just going to suspend your opponent's Digimon and beat it up and then try to deal damage or gain benefits for beating up the opponent's Digimon. It has the ability to climb the stages faster than any of the other colors, but that doesn't matter when that stack just easily gets torn down and they can only rebuild so many times before they just can't, and then the deck starts to crumble upon the pressure of itself. It has the worst removal compared to all of the other colors, so it's just having a really hard time, on top of the fact that its card draw is still one of the worst, if not the worst, compared to all of the other colors. Red and black, even though they don't have as great of card draw as purple, yellow, or blue, it still has some to help it along, mostly dependent on the archetype that you're playing with, but green just doesn't really have a really good card draw that it can rely on. And then as far as the other color, we have white. We don't really have a whole lot of white decks, and white isn't necessarily a hardcore color. It's more of a support color that generally does its own thing. Most of the time, white means anti-synergy, so when you see a white card, it generally could go into almost any deck, but it doesn't want to interact with any of the other colors. So that's generally its limitation, and the only actual true white decks that we have is Eosmon, if you could count that, because you usually want to play Eosmon with another color, namely green, and you have Diabormon, which isn't really a white deck, it's more of a black deck that just has a couple of white cards in it, and then the only other white deck, like true white deck we have, is D-Reaper. But D-Reaper is its own self-baked-in thing, but regardless, this is just all my interpretation on what I think the best colors and why are in the game. Now, as far as the supporting evidence to why I think blue and yellow are the best is, well, they've consistently had the best showing, as I mentioned before. We go all the way back to BT01, we had Blue Omnimon. Blue Omnimon was just the best deck. Even in 1.0 in Japan, it was just all about Blue Omnimon. What made Blue Omnimon so good was the fact that compared to all of the other colors in 1.0, blue was the most consistent color. So it just could climb the stage, it had Hammer Spark to manipulate the memory to be able to easily set up and go into an Omnimon compared to a lot of the other colors. Red had the higher damage output Omnimon, but that didn't matter if it didn't have the consistency to back it up. Then if we transition to 1.5, 1.5 was kind of ruled by both Blue Imperial as the primary aggro deck and Yellow Shine Greymon as the primary control deck. These were just the top two decks that were in that format for, again, their respective game plans. Blue was still hyper consistent, Imperial was extra aggression on top of jamming, so it just was very safe and easy to swing with, especially with multiple swings per turn, so you could line up a really good combo turn to just chip the opponent, then go into an Imperial finish. Then Shine Greymon was the control that was in 1.5 just because it was relying on Tamers and utilizing Tamers as a secondary resource to make Shine's control basically unmatched by anything else currently in the game. If we break it down to the Japanese formats, Shine was really powerful in BT2 and Imperial was really good in BT3. Then transitioning over to BT4. BT4, at least in Japan, was kind of interesting because they had Nidhoggmon, and Nidhoggmon was one of the best control tools that we had in the game, especially in combination with the fact that green has a very easy way to build all the way up into it. So it actually did get nerfed in the English format, and we only had it legal for about a week before Hidden Potential discovered just to completely nerf the deck, making it not perform as well, and as a result, Yellow War Greymon in BT4 kind of took the spot as the premier deck to play and run, and it ended up having the most success, on top of the fact that it was a part yellow deck that actually had some extra aggression and control to it. Then, come BT5, we have Lord Nightmon as the big powerhouse deck. Lord Nightmon has a whole bunch of tools that it works with, so it has recovery, it has removal, it has the ability to play Digimon for free to apply extra pressure. It was just one of the best decks to play in that format. Then come BT6 and EX1, we had Bond of Friendship as the best deck in that format. So Bond of Friendship just was a very powerful card because of its warp potential to just bring out a lot of burst damage out of nowhere, and even if it couldn't burst the opponent down, it still had removal ability attached to it to try to help deal with the opponent's field, especially if it was a wide field, because with Bond of Friendship, ideally, you're going to be swinging 2 to 3 times, if not more, depending on what the build was and the level of aggression that actually was able to stick on the field. Because, again, similar to Imperial, what you did is you just tried to chip them out, gain lots of value and resources off of your tamers, and then just line up a really big Bond of Friendship play to just clean the opponent's field and deal lots of damage at the same time, hopefully trying to close out the game that way. Then come BT7, we have Blue Hybrids as the top Forerunner deck. Blue Hybrids was just really, really hard to deal with because you couldn't really interact with its Digimon because it was digivolving off of tamers. And that was kind of the whole core or gimmick of what Hybrids was doing, but what made Blue Hybrids stand out better than the others was the fact that, well, it was in blue. Blue has higher levels of consistency compared to all of the other colors. Blue also had more hybrids than all of the other colors, on top of really good tamer quality. So you had cards like Davis to help dig out your blue cards. You had cards like Tommy that stripped the opponent's inheritable sources to set up your blue hybrids, which you were playing the Korikakumon package to be able to stunlock the opponent's Digimon to keep them from doing anything. So with easy source removal and stunning, it just made it so you slowly build up a field of tamers, aggress and chip at the opponent, and then line up a big turn, again, where you just hybrid swing, hybrid swing, hybrid swing, and that was the game, and the opponent just stood there and watched as they really couldn't do anything. Because the crazy thing about hybrid-based decks is they play lots of tamers, and their security threats aren't necessarily coming from options, but tamers to fuel and facilitate what Hybrids is trying to do. And as a result, the best deck in BT8 as of right now is looking to be Yellow Hybrids. Yes, I understand that Imperial is performing very well, but again, that is another blue deck. Then what Yellow Hybrids is doing that's making it above the other colors, at least in BT08, is the fact that it actually has removal, it has better chip, and it has a better level 6 to be able to easily aggress and chip at the opponent. So what was making the deck not perform so well before was the fact that it was just lacking something to help it close out games. So Rapidmon, coming from BT08, not only plays like a mini Shine Greymon to help wipe the opponent's field of their Digimon, but is also a good card to start chipping with because of the armor purge ability. Then you have cards like Ophanimon Fall Down Mode that you could easily go up the stage with your hybrids, and on Ophanimon recover even more, and then you have a sticky body because it'll replace itself when it gets deleted. So it's just a really good and powerful deck, even though it is actively trying to slow down the game and the format as a whole. And then we do have some data points from Japanese BT9. Keep in mind, Japanese data is skewed. I use this more as a popularity spectrum rather than an actual power spectrum, but it still does tell some stories. So these are all of the decks that have topped large events in Japan and had some of the best and most showings. So we could see that the top 4 decks are Alphamon, which is an OTK deck, Garurumon, which is kind of an OTK deck, it's more of a tempo deck, War Greymon, which is another OTK deck, and then you have Yellow Hybrids, which is the control deck. So there's just a lot of aggression that was added into BT9, and as a result, you still have a blue and a yellow deck that are still performing very, very well, and this is just a format where once you make OTK a little bit easier and more consistent, just because, you know, X-Antibodies / Alphamon had gotten technically 3 sets of support, it just is a lot for the deck to play around with it to find the best combination of cards to make it as powerful as it possibly can, and that's kind of a similar story to War Greymon, where it just has lots of different tools from lots of different sets to try to make itself even more consistent. And then as far as a quick early look at what is going on in BT10 in Japan, we still have blue and yellow ending up in top slots a lot of the time. So you have a Blue Flare as, you know, a blue deck. You have Garurumon, which came from BT9, which is still performing well. You have X-Antibody from, again, BT9, which is still performing well. Then you have Cross Hearts, which is kind of like D-Reapers, where it's like its own mostly self-contained thing that is a multicolored deck. Then you also have Dark Nightmon, which is a black deck. that is performing very well. Always nice to see a black deck do well, but again, it just had multiple sets of support, and it has some really good concepts and tools that it's trying to play around with, because it is dipping a little bit into purple. But the last deck in Tier 1 for the developing meta of BT10 in Japan is, again, Yellow Hybrids as that premier yellow deck. So Yellow Hybrids, ever since it came out, was just that strong. Blue has always just been that strong because of all of the different consistency tools that it's had since the beginning of the game, making them two of the best colors. I'm not saying that any of the other colors can't compete. As we saw, there's just a lot of different possibilities and a lot of different decks, and the meta does change depending on the set and what cards do get support and what decks get support. But regardless, this is just all my thoughts and opinions on what I think the best colors in the game are. Usually there's a couple of different factors that go into when a deck, or when a color in this case, performs relatively well. I think some really big factors are A, consistency, B, removal, C, tamer quality, and D, Digimon and concept quality. So when all of those aspects line up and are really, really strong and on point, then the deck is going to do relatively well. If any of those are slightly off, then it's going to be at a slight disadvantage compared to other decks. Usually, not all decks you want to have all those areas or aspects be on point, because then that creates what we see here with blue and yellow being a little bit more polarizing than some of the other colors and the other concepts. So that's all I really have for this video. As always, feel free to tell me your thoughts down in the comments below, and down in the description below are a couple of different ways you could support me and the channel. So I do have a TCG Player affiliate link, so when you use that link to buy cards off of TCG Player, then some of that money will go to supporting me and the channel. I also do make and sell playmats over on Overcard Gamers on Facebook, so when you buy a playmat with my design, then some of that money will also go to help supporting me and the channel. And on top of all of that, I do have a Twitch account over on twitch.tv/Zenitsu, so giving me a follow and a subscription also helps support me there, and I do play Digimon on top of various other games on that platform as well. So thank you everyone for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content, and I'll see you in the next video.